It's really a great pleasure for me again to have the opportunity to introduce Don Potts to you all. Don arrived here a couple of days ago to MIU. He's a Siddha from California, and he's a sculptor. And yesterday we had the pleasure of looking at some of the cars that he had done, which is some of his most recent work. They were very unusual and very exciting. And now today I think he's going to talk to us about some of the other work he's done prior to his cars, so we'll get an idea of the evolution that he's gone through in the whole art-making process. His talk's been very inspiring, and I'm sure that it will be equally as inspiring today. So, Don.
Thanks. I referred to some earlier works yesterday, and I thought it'd be nice to show you some of those. I'm not going all the way. I started out as a painter, and as an undergraduate I was a painter, but I won't go that far back because I feel there's a definite difference between a student and an artist. There is a point where you're an artist, there's a point when you're a student. Might be nice at this time to maybe speak to that a little bit. I feel what an artist is doing is very much like meditation technique, of course not as powerful, very crude in that it uses, daily things like money and materials and time and all this kind of stuff. But it is a technique for growth. And I think the way an artist goes about developing or growing is that the artist acts like a hunter. And I would say even more like a trapper. He's out trying to catch a subtler level of awareness. When we think back of earlier diagrams of TM, and they show the bubbles coming up and popping on the surface of the surface that the bubbles are popping on are your lowest level of awareness, conscious awareness, and that's where you realize your thoughts. Yet the source is way down there someplace, at the bottom, or at the source. Pure consciousness. An artist is would love to perceive at that level. I kind of envision that surface, that lower level of the consciousness, not to be a flat sort of space, but a space very much like the ocean in that it's wavy. It sometimes dips a little deeper into the subconscious or the unrevealed conscious, and sometimes a little higher, this and that, like that. And I think when an artist works, he goes to a very quiet space, his studio, and sets up a situation where the mind settles, relaxes, and drops down to this plane, to his subtlest conscious awareness. And because the surface is sort of wavy, sometimes something very sweet, something so lovely, will sort of express itself. Something very sweet because it's more it's purer than when the thoughts one normally picks up, because it's a little bit subtler than that, because the wave drops down in there, and you can taste this real sweet thing, and you'd like to have your hands on it. So you start out building a trap to catch this thing. I don't care what kind of artist you are, painter, sculptor, speaker. I'm hopefully that'll happen to me today. Yesterday, I felt like I said all the things I normally say. What's really fun when I speak is when all of a sudden I hear myself saying things I've never said before and understanding things that I'd never understood before, as I'm telling you, like I know what I'm talking about. So the artist gets in this space, this subtle space, and tastes this very sweet thing and tries to grab it. He wants it, wants it all time. He wants to be aware of this all the time. He wants this influencing all his actions at all times. So he has very little information, just the subtlest of information. But that's enough to start to trap. Start building something. Doesn't make any difference, to try to catch this thing. You'll be influenced, the trap will be influenced very much by, what you feel or taste. As this trap starts to proceed, as you start to build this, it starts luring in this hidden thing, this hidden awareness. It starts being sucked in by the trap. As you're building this thing, this all just, sort of happens. One doesn't think about this. This is just something I made up. But as you're starting to build this trap, as you're becoming a little bit more aware of what this is, the trap starts refining. You're starting to realize what parts of the trap are redundant. What's keeping the prey away. Too much of the hook is exposed so the fish doesn't bite. And so there's a sort of a back and forth sort of thing happening. You go to that feeling, you work on the trap sucks the feeling in, makes the feeling a little bit more concrete. You go back to the trap, you get rid of the junk, you build up more purity. You go back to the feeling. You're going back and forth like that. And the whole process just starts sucking this thing in, the trap's starting to catch it. All of a sudden you realize a lot of the trap is just sort of like a stage. It's just the early stage of catching this thing. It got it in the area, and then all of a sudden one part of this trap becomes very, very important. No fussing around in this area. Other areas, so there's some glue hanging off it, or it's maybe an inch too big. It's not important, because it's just sort of like the stage. It sets the space or something like that. But then there's the area that really gets subtle, really important, and has to be absolutely correct, or it won't catch this thing. And what you're trying to catch is something that's, you've never had your hands on. It's subtler than you can think, than your awareness can comprehend. So the trap has to be subtler than any trap you've ever made. You can't use old trap-making techniques. It'll just get you so far, but it won't take you that last step to catch this brand new thing. So you're all alone, not all alone. Mama's always around, but you're, you can't go to history books. You can't go to past work. You have to just respond to what it is you're trying to catch. And it gets incredibly exciting. At the last moment, when you put the last touches on the trap, something will happen. It's not a trap anymore. It is what you've been trying to catch. This then becomes that awareness or that idea or whatever. You can't talk about these things in words, And there it is. And you look at it, and there have been times where I've just cried, not, go and lie down on the bed, cry, but I mean, emotion will just pour out of my eyes, It's just like, there it is. I mean, you're seeing it in full awareness. And what's incredible about it, I mean, really incredible, and a lot of times you're 2/3 of the way down, or 3/4 of the way down, 9/10 of the way down, 99/100ths of the way down. You're almost there, and it almost seems silly to go a little further and finish it because you figured you got it, right? And all of a sudden you're getting ready for the next level. But it's so important to take something all the way to the end and really finish it cleanly. Not cleanly in that you're a fanatic about craftsmanship, but cleanly so that you can see it clearly. There it is, and it's full. In its fullness, it's there, absolutely clean. So you can step back, be someone else if you want, and still be able to see it. It's in the piece. When this happens, a sort of a chain reaction happens, and a whole bunch of things blossoms in front of you. You not only expose that particular thing, it seems like that particular thing has a spot, and then a whole series of things around it just seem to explode in front of you. And then I think it's very much like the old, thing where meditation is really nothing but cleaning off each sheet of glass so you can see further down. It's like that. It's like you've cleaned off another sheet of glass and you're a little bit further down. Okay, that's a real quick sort of idea of how an artist may work. There's a difference between a student and an artist now, the original. I think a student is still learning how to make a trap, right? And as a student, you'll catch a lot of things, but you won't necessarily be working right at that bottom edge of your nervous system or your conscious awareness. So the work I'm going to show you now is actually, I think, maybe one of the first piece, the piece that's on the screen right now. It's called Black Monk. And I felt when I did this piece that I wasn't a student anymore. I'm not a student anymore. I caught something. And there was a story. I was at the University of Iowa at the time. And I was with a lot of writers. It's a very heavy-duty writing school. And there was a story that someone read to me about, it's a Russian story called Black Monk. And I'll just sort of sum it up as I remember it. This guy was an artist, and he was having a hard time. It was later in his life, or middle of his life, or something like that. And he was having a hard time. He couldn't quite get it together like he used to. And he was pretty down about the whole thing. And he's out walking in the woods or someplace, and sits down on a bench, and this black monk sits down next to him. And they have this very sweet conversation. He goes home, and comes back the next day, and he runs into this black monk again. And this black monk just kept being around, and he kept running into this black monk. And the black monk started being really meaningful to him. And all of a sudden, he's getting back into his work again. And then the black monk starts visiting him, in his studio. And everything's great again. He's just cooking, And this black monk seems to be this great inspiration. And he's getting known again. People are getting interested in his work again. He's just really, just sailing away. He used to work late at night and have long conversations with the black monk and stuff like that. And one night his wife woke up and heard him having a conversation. And she went in and was talking to himself. And she was real, confused and concerned, and mentioned it to him, and he said, go away or something like that. I'm busy. He didn't even really hear what she said. And so, because he was so into his work at that particular time, like, you shouldn't be bothering me when I'm in my studio. And so she got a brother or an uncle or something like that, and they came and they observed, and they figured he was crazy. And so, they got him into a mental institute and all that kind of stuff, and they made him sane again. And took away this imaginary figure or what from this guy. So he was just a normal human being again, and he was back in his life again. And there he was, all depressed, and nothing was happening, and couldn't do art anymore. And yet all the small people around him thought he was just nice and fine, a regular person again. And they were all happy. They had their what they called normal human being back. But he was nothing in his own mind. And he started getting real sick, and he was dying and all this stuff. And, and the story was just sort of coming to a close. And then right on his deathbed, he was just about to die, and the black monk came again. And, the story is written real well, so it's very exciting. And they had this beautiful conversation. And then he left, he died. And I was just incredibly impressed with that story, Not so much that one might have some imaginary or some special someone come and sit down next to you, but the idea that it's your baby, When you're in your studio, you can go mad if you want, or it doesn't make any difference. It's your baby. Do it any way you want, you're in your deep self. You're into the subtlest aspects of yourself. Um, you're running the show. The whole idea is to let the intellect back off. Don't be rationale. You know, don't use the parts from that conscious awareness up. You know, work down into that other space, the more pure space. And well, anyway, it was just an incredible story to me. And I did this painting called Black Monk. I don't know how to explain how the painting relates to any of the story or anything like that. But I could talk about it a little bit in that it's a wax, it's painted with wax and caustic, and it's over canvas. And the canvas has been stretched over a wooden frame. Linen, natural linen that's been shrunk with hot water, so it's real taut. Built up with modeling paste and then painted with a black wax. Next slide. Oh, okay. By my right elbow? It's what? Oh, right here. Thank you. The story is kind of a heavy-duty story, right? It's filled with all this thickness and things like that. And my work was very thick at that time, you know, dark, heavy. At that time, and I still feel this very much, that a work should have a presence to it. I mean, I don't feel a thing is completed unless it has a presence. It's almost like it has its own being. Scale sometimes has something to do with this. When the scale gets large, like this particular painting you're looking at here is about 8 feet high. It leans out from the wall about, well, I'd say a foot, foot and a half. But it tapers back right to the wall. It's canvas again, stretched over various materials, and then it's painted with a deep wax. You're probably not seeing any color at all. They're deep sort of browns and things like this. It's almost like the hide of an elephant. This mounted on the wall, you know, 5 or 6 feet above the ground, really leans at you. There's a lot of presence in that piece. It's not positive energy in a sense, but I don't consider it negative energy either. It's sort of like not knowing energy. It's almost like a pagan, something pagan that someone would worship. It has the quality of demanding your attention and demanding that you respect it, yet it's neither negative or positive. It's just extremely heavy. You walk softly around it. I wouldn't want it to try to tell me how to do things. You know, I wouldn't want to live the life that it told me, you know, that it might suggest I should live. But I had an incredible satisfaction finishing this painting. It's called Lord of the Flies, which is kind of a heavy title too. But I was into heavy stuff at that time. Premeditation. This is a piece I did have incredible tears when I finished. This is about 14 feet long, 8 feet high. I think maybe I'm making that a little bigger than it actually is, but that's how I feel about it. It's a very large piece. It's more abstract than the other two. I don't know what it refers to or what, but it was just a big hunk of stuff on the wall that pleased me incredibly. It just felt so good that I got all this stuff hanging up on that wall, you know. It leaned too, but it didn't imply any pressure at me. It didn't try to control my life or tell me what to do or any of this stuff. It would be like walking across the field and finding yourself standing next to a rhinoceros about 8 feet high, and it wasn't concerned about you and you had no fear of it, you know, and you could just kind of look at the thickness of its skin and things like that. That's what I felt when I finished this piece. I called it Tuft Bull. I was extremely happy with this piece because it was full and it had presence, yet as compared to the other two, it was lighter. It was heavy, but it wasn't heavy in like it was trying to tell me something. It was just heavy like a rhinoceros is heavy. You know, rhinoceros is kind of a sweet old thing, right? As compared to a pagan symbol on a wall, you know. Funny thing happened with this. I brought it to the gallery, you know, all excited. And, they got all excited, and this was a San Francisco gallery, and there was this San Francisco Art Festival, and they were going to show at the art festival. And this is when I was a little more small time, you know, and the gallery looked more like a department store. They stuck everything on the wall and all that stuff. And of course, as it was a festival, they brought it all out and things like that. Now, you know, we only go to the best places and stuff like that, which is nice because your work will tell you what happens to this piece. So they bring it to the art festival, and there's this, you know, everybody's just hanging things in the trees and everything. It's in one of these parks in the city. And there's this building in there, I guess it's the Johns probably or something like that. And they lean it against the John, you know, and it's sort of in the morning, and the sun's coming up, you know, from the east, and they got it on the west side of the building, right? They go back to the gallery to pick up some more work because they're, you know, they have about 10 or 15 artists in their gallery. And they come back to the art festival, and all these people are hanging around my painting, you know, and they're getting really excited, like, hey, Don's really getting some action, you know. And then as they're walking up the, you know, the walkway toward this place, you know, there's also sort of a row of people up the walkway, you know. And it's starting to get a little strange. And then all of a sudden they notice this sort of dark brown fluid sort of running down the sidewalk, right? And they're getting closer and closer, and there's no painting there anymore. It's all sort of run off the piece, down the sidewalk, and running down the street. Turns out that the sun had gone around the building since they've been gone. This was wax. They're real smart, right? So they just left it in the sun, or they didn't even think. The sun came around, just melted the sucker right off. They phoned me up the next day. I laughed. I mean, it just cracked me up. I thought it was so funny. I hung up the phone 2 minutes later. A shock just went right through my body. I mean, I just like, you know, my first reaction was to laugh, because it was pretty funny, you know. They just blew it like that, you know, so innocently. Bye-bye painting, you know. I had worked on it for months, and, you know, maybe a couple people saw it, and I didn't even get to see it melt, you know. It must have been beautiful, you know, as it just slowly let go, you know, little clumps falling and stuff. And so I missed all that. But then there was a shock for a moment. And then it was sort of, you know, c'est la vie or whatever. I might say something right in there. I mentioned something yesterday. I think I said something, well, then it would have just been craft. I think I mentioned that at one time during my talk yesterday, or referred to craft as compared to art. And then all of a sudden I realized, geez, I better follow this up. So I might mention something right now having to do with, oh, I know, I was talking to faculty the night before, talking about a class where a friend of mine, ceramic class, and everybody had to turn in their best cup that they had ever done. You know, they all had like a month or a month and a half to this beautiful cup, right? And the way he showed it, he had like a chair and a chair, and then he had a 2x4 over the tops of the chairs across, and then he had the cups just laying right across on the 2x4. Then he went around and critiqued each one, you know, and everybody was very interested in all that stuff. And then after he was finished, he just sort of flipped the 2x4, and they all went down on the floor, and immediately you could tell the artists from the craftsmen. You know, the artists were shocked. Everybody was shocked, of course, right away, but the artists sort of recouped. The craftsman had a heck of a time recouping. And what I might say is, I think the difference between art and craft lies in the level of, you know, where's the product? Two people sit down and make a pot. One's an artist and one's a craftsman. The craftsman's concern is to get the pot. The pot's the product. Let's say the cup or whatever. The artist is using the cup. He's the product. His own expansion of his awareness is the product. I'm showing you the works over here, right? If you want to see the art, you look at me. I'm the piece, really. You know, me, I'm the piece. I'm just using these. I use these. Just like when I know exactly what Marshy means when he says don't pay attention to your meditations, and how far out the experience is, you know, I mean, so what? You're just using that situation. You're the piece. Pay attention to yourself. You're the trip, right? It's your awareness is what it's all about. And it's the same for an artist. For a craftsman, it's a little different. The product is the piece. The craftsman wants a pot or wants a cup. That's why he sat down. Wants a building, wants a pair of shoes, whatever. I did a series of cars. They didn't necessarily come out like cars. I did, you know, they could have ended up, who knows what they could have ended up. It wouldn't have made any difference. The important thing was that I ended up someplace a little bit deeper. What was important to me was another piece of glass gets wiped off. And I go a little deeper into my awareness of myself. Or, I think I might have mentioned this yesterday when I was talking about destructive process, you know, as art being more destructive than creative, as far on the side of the artist, his actions. His actions are more destructive. Life comes in and does the creativity. It's almost like an artist is trying to destroy a very weak, thin, synthetic description of what things are, you know, of what the world is, of what reality is. In a craftsman's side, the craftsman a lot of times does just the opposite. He perpetuates how things are, trying to make a cup like a cup. An artist will try to make a cup not like a cup and end up with a cup, a subtler idea of a cup. I think when I talk about craftsmen, I talk about artists, it sounds like there's a big difference. It's not. It's very close, and you can only speak about it. I think it's very difficult to come up to a craftsman and say, oh, you're a craftsman, you're not an artist. A lot of craftsmen I think as a craftsman develops, the line gets really thin. I mean, because to a craftsman, the product is the piece, the byproduct is his evolution. To the artist, the product is his evolution, the byproduct is his piece. So they're both coming up with the same thing, it's just where's the emphasis? And that's just enough to change it, just slightly. Okay, enough of that. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, then I sort of stopped painting. And I started building more. This piece is called Confessual. All of a sudden things started getting very sexual for me. As you can see in the center section there's a very obvious shape. If one was to kneel on that like a confessual, it would be even more obvious. Although it's a very lovely thing. Now it's really strange. I didn't realize what that shape really represented. Maybe you're not even catching it. It's kind of a strange view. But it was like back to the Lord of the Flies and things like that. It's sort of, I wouldn't want to say religious overtones, but somewhere in there somewhere. Trying to understand, the fact that it was a confessional, that you would come up and kneel before this thing. Not that I was making myself an idol, but it was something I was definitely dealing with at the time, like the Lord of the Flies. Those two bags on either side are sort of made up with fiberglass, and they're very organic. They almost feel like an organ or something like that. I don't have a photograph of the back side of the piece, but the back side of the piece was just left raw. All the 2x4s, everything that that built up the piece were just left there. Fiberglass dripping off, nails in it, whatever. And then the front side was fairly refined. Most of it was found objects, flooring, a park bench, halter from a horse, things like that. I was still a graduate student at that time. This one also is another piece. This is also very sexual in a sense. I found that those curved sections are wagon wheel blanks, and the part up front, furthest away from you, is like the underside of an English riding saddle. very soft, very sensuous. And up against the part in the back was the upper side, or the part you would sit on of the English riding saddle, but it was upside down. And this rocked, and the back side would rock over the front side and sort of caress it in a sense. It would sort of lean out and look over at it, and then it would back off, and then it would come forward again. Very beautiful piece. I call it Rocker. This one I call Roan Over. You can still see the same materials. I found a bunch of stuff and did a whole series of things with it. This one here rocks to the left and to the right in a very beautiful way. If you rock it to the left, it'll almost tip over. It goes that far. And when it comes back across center, there's a little flat spot, and it kind of makes a little thump noise as it goes, and then it goes all the way to the other side again. And it comes back again. It goes thump as it goes over the center. It'll rock for quite a while. This is the piece I mentioned yesterday called Easy Greasy. You got a long ways to slide. I'm getting a little lighter now. Found out life doesn't have to be real heavy and all that stuff. It can be just a lot of fun. And I'm getting more refined with my materials now. The shiny object is a hood of a Studebaker. I can't remember what year, but that incredibly beautiful, slick Studebaker. And the top part is there's like a backbone of hardwood that runs down through the center. And then thin plywood is adhered to that and forced into a curve. And then over that surface, a fine veneer is laid. The whole thing is sort of cantilevers off of two springs that are underneath the lower wooden parts, the darker wooden shapes. So the whole thing sort of like tends to want to go forward, but the back is kind of floats off behind it. This piece went to the World's Fair. I was still a student, graduate student, and went off to the New York World's Fair. And they put it outside, right in front of some big building, and it rained the night of the opening, and the next day it was worthless. So I had a lot of problems like that. So you can see how right or wrong, I developed the idea of what an artist was, and it wasn't important that the pieces stay. It kind of got me into that awareness real quick. Got a little insurance company that helped me out at that particular time. I'd sort of like to have had it around a little longer. Then I even got more refined. This piece is actually made up from two plastic canopies from a jet airplane, laid side by side, bridged across with some sort of wooden stuff. And the outside was covered with leather, and the inside was veneered with mahogany, which was really a job because I had to stretch compound curves. Felt like Michelangelo. I was on my back inside there for about a month and a half. Came out just beautiful. It's called Bananas Have No Bones. And the sad part about it was, though, I was going to enter it in San Francisco, some big show in San Francisco. And I had just finished a piece about a week earlier. And somebody lent me this funny little trailer, like about a 4-foot by 4-foot trailer, and I was tying this thing down on top of this trailer. It's about 8 feet long. It's about 5 feet wide. And the person was going to come back, and it took him about an hour and a half to come back. And the heat had got to it, and all the veneer inside started coming down, unglued. So I taped up the ends with some plastic or something so the wind wouldn't blow through it. Drove to San Francisco at about 80 miles an hour from San Jose. Looked like it was propelling me down the road. It looked like this big jet engine. Got to the museum. I had 20 minutes to get inside, rub all the veneer back into position, and then carry it in. And then I left a note saying if I got in the show, I would come back and repair the inside. Got in the show, repaired it. And art's like that sometimes. Personally, it looks like I have a lot of technology. I don't. I just sort of make it up. I understand it's the somewhat importance of permanence, but on the other hand, to me, it's not that important that it be super permanent. Uh, what's really important to me is that at least when it's finished for me, that I can see it clearly. How long I see it clearly isn't too important. I'd like a month, maybe a year, maybe 5 years, that'd be great. But anyway, that's just sort of how I feel about these things. I know art historians don't like that attitude at all. This is another piece sort of in the same area. I used to have a 37 Ford when I was a kid. I finally did get one car, but I never finished it because I just got too particular about it, and so I never ever got to drive it around. And I found these are actually the front fenders of the 37 Ford. They never ever were on a car. I got them brand new, and they never ever got on a car. And so I covered the fenders with leather, and I made a fiberglass copy, and on the opposite side, I covered them with fur. And in between, there was the section was made up of wood. And the whole thing stood about maybe 4.5 feet high, and I called it Heine's Up. And it sort of reminded me when I was a little kid, when we'd play handball or something like that, the loser would have to do Heine's Up. And you'd go up against the wall, grab your ankle with your hiney aiming at the person would get 3 throws at the guy's butt. So I finished this piece, man, it was obviously Heine's Up. Well, it showed at a show at Berkeley called the Funk Art Show. I don't know if you ever heard of funk art. It's sort of like a San Francisco area type art. And well, anyway, so somebody decided, hey, we should have a show and document or make a big deal out of this. Anyway, this piece was in there, and someone just before the show, someone bought the piece, and his name was Monty Stickles. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was the meanest tackle in the NFL at that time. And his, what's the favorite position of a tackle, or what's the position he's mostly in? It's Heine's Up, right? They're down, in the line, they're down like that, right? You see all these butts up in the air right as they're getting ready to charge. And so I thought that was incredible that this guy bought the piece. And it was great. The night of the opening, this guy was a monster too, and very sweet, but definitely secured his territory. And people were around the piece, and he kept telling them not to touch, and he'd be just guarding the piece all night and telling them that that's my piece, be good, and, it was great. This is probably the sweetest piece I did before I did the car. In fact, I still consider it one of my sweetest pieces. It's very hard to see in a photograph in a way, because you just don't feel the dimension of it. The panels are like about 7 feet by 5 feet. The surface is inlaid. Well, there's like strips of veneer, have beautiful grain, and then between each strip of veneer there'd be like 3 little black lines like you might find on a guitar. Finished on the surface. Then in between the two it comes up on this slight leather, comes up, and then it hits this fur in between. And the left side and the right side are separate. And they're on a frame that's almost like, like measuring scales, when you place the weight up on this side comes up, but they remain flat. They don't go like this, like a teeter-totter, but they go flat up and down like that. And if you were to come up and just touch it in the corner, it would apply a little twist to the surface, so the other side would twist the opposite. So if you touch the corner, it wasn't obvious that the thing would go up and down or move or anything. It would just be this incredible surface, and people would tend to come up and touch it. When they touched it, it just sort of, you would feel for a moment a contact on your finger, and then it would leave. And you'd hardly see the movement because it would just sort of leave. Then you would touch it again, and it'd go a little further. And if you played it very sensitively and just touched it, it would go like this and come back, and the fur would play against itself. It was a very sexual piece, but very quiet. That's sort of a detail of it up close, but I'm sure you're not really seeing very much that's all I really wish to show of the old stuff. Anybody have any questions at this time about that stuff? Techniques or anything, whatever? Yeah. There's a microphone, would be nice.
I'm just wondering, because of the process that the materials that you're using and everything, I'm just wondering how you went about refining the process and the way you talked about making the trap and then refining the trap. And I mean, you're dealing with wax and these things, and I can't imagine how you would work with this through so many stages. It just seemed like you would have to have an idea and just do it right on the spot.
Okay.
I was just wondering.
I guess my answer to that is I didn't know what I was doing until I finished. You know, just like with this particular piece here, I knew it had something to do with two flat planes, you know, floating slightly above the ground. And, you know, I got the plywood and had it laid out. Then I knew I wanted those, I realized that those surfaces had to be very beautiful surfaces, very refined surfaces. So I started getting into the surfaces. At one time, I thought maybe I might be putting them side by side, vertical. I didn't know what I was really doing. And somewhere along the line, I wanted them to go up and down. The whole idea of, I think it might have even been accidental. I might have had them laid out in the studio or something and just bumped one or something. And the idea of this moving, all this, you know how these things go. You don't know. To me, what happens is that your conscious awareness can only go so far, you know, at any particular time. But underneath, there's still you down there. It's very conscious, and it wants so bad for you up there to know what's going on. So I think it's trying really hard to communicate. You're really trying to speak to yourself. You know, this walking, talking thing isn't really the me at all. I'm huge underneath, you know. There's just a little bit of me on the surface you're talking around. Maharishi said something about one time, until you get to CC, you're just fooling around, you know. And I really believe that's true. That's not his exact words, but something close like that. So part of the setting up of the trap is letting that deeper part of you finish it for you. And so I'm setting these up. I've got them laid around, and so you bump the piece. It looks like an accident. Well, maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe your body's trying to suggest things to do. And you just keep playing, working. Pretty soon, all of a sudden, you know, the idea, when it moved up and down, then I got into the idea of what that structure would be like, you know, what the mechanics of that would be. Then the idea, you know, all of a sudden I realized one plane's, there's an edge that's going to be going up and down. I got into that edge. It just walks along. Then all of a sudden, there it is. You know. A lot of times you start out with this little taste, and you don't necessarily bring just that taste out. Sometimes you go way beyond that taste, or that taste just leads you in. I don't care which glass I wipe off as long as I wipe one off. Sometimes that can be, you got to be careful when you're doing it. You have to be incredibly alert, because sometimes you can be caught. You can trap yourself. You know, you can start out, there's this real sweet thing that starts you going into your piece. You know, let's say you're a painter, and all of a sudden you paint this one shape or this one idea, and it leads you in. You know, it's the first part of the trap. It opens a door or something, lets you flow a little bit. You start flowing in, and all of a sudden, that initial thing was maybe a very little small flow, maybe not even a very important thing, but you feel so obliged to it because it got you started, right? And a little later, your painting or your art has gotten into this incredible, you know, it's got into a whole space. It's way beyond that beginning stage. Yet it's so hard to paint that out. You know, you feel like, you know, it's like leaving your friends because now you're famous or something like that. It has that same sort of feel to it. You just can't, you're afraid to leave it go or paint it out. You feel obliged to it almost, you know, or that it had a purpose and you want to honor it. You don't want to paint it out like, well, you're all done. You know. So you want to honor it and constantly honor it, but then it holds you back. It's been honored. You've allowed it to do that, and that's the biggest honor of all, you know. Like me, you know, you're allowing me to speak to you. When I go, we don't care, you know, what happened. If you ever remember me again, it's not that important. But this is the sweet time right now. Did I sort of? Oh, okay. I didn't know what I was doing. I just pressed the button. I looked down, pressed the button, and here we are someplace else. Just like here I am sitting in front of you with a bunch of cameras. What I'd like to show you now is a performance piece I did. And I think this is sort of a fun one to bring to meditators because I found myself in a situation where I hadn't done art for quite a while. Just came back from a prep course. I don't know which one, probably right near the end, and just before the cities. And it was a faculty show, and I had to come up with a piece for the faculty show. I had nothing I wanted to show. And a lot of the emphasis in the prep course was do less and accomplish more. And there was a big emphasis on resting. I said, boy, how am I going to, you know, do this so that right in the middle of school I can just go rest and have a really strong piece and do less, you know, don't do anything. I mean, how far down the line can I go? How can I have a real powerful, exciting piece that everybody's totally into? And I wanted to jack up the faculty show. Faculty shows can be very boring at times because it's, you know, it just happens to be the group of faculty that happen to be there. You know, you put up the piece, and they don't necessarily relate to each other. They're hard to look at. It's what the faculty member has around. You know, the faculty member doesn't get, you know, it's not New York, you know. It's his students, although, you know, at the same time he wants to show his best, but at the same time, you know, I think they tend to be sort of weak shows. I think we can all agree with that. Although, you know, it's very nice to see a faculty piece. So I thought it'd be really nice to have something in the, hey, you know, because I also came back from this prep course and I want to be real good at all the time, right? And let's do it, man. Let's really have a nice thing in the faculty show. So I had this platform that I had built previously. I had a studio in Berkeley. It was all concrete floors and things like that. And this is when I was building the cars. And they were just too refined to lay on this concrete floor. I just didn't like them. Of course, yes, this was after the time that I had this experience of some of these earlier pieces in Fischbach Gallery, laying on the concrete floor, and they just looked very uncomfortable. And so I made sort of a platform. It was like about 8 feet by 15 feet or so. There were 3 panels. On one side of the panels was a hardwood floor. The other side was white formica. So I could have either a white formica platform or a hardwood floor platform. And this was built over square tubing, steel square tubing. And in the corners were these gigantic casters. The wheels were this big metal fabrication that came down to the platform. So the platform was about this high off the ground and with about this much space, and in each corner there were these big wheels. So it was a very beautiful thing. And I could roll it around my studio anywhere I wanted and have this really refined platform. After I finished the master chassis more or less sat on that platform, and I built the bodies directly on the master chassis. And a lot of people came and saw what I was doing. It was a 6-year project. And so there was a lot of, you know, people from Europe were coming through, all kinds of people coming through. It started getting legendary in a sense. And I had it lit really nice and everything, so when you came in my studio, you could really see the piece. Well, anyway, so I brought this platform, put it in the gallery in a nice angle, so it was very dramatic and tough, yet very low. It didn't take away from any of the other things that were on the wall. And then I plopped a little chair on it. Very nice chair. Before this, I sent out a letter to about, I think it was about 60 or 70 people, all the people that I seemed to bump into around school. This is Sonoma State College in California. Administrators, campus police, guy that came and dumped the garbage, students, faculty members, whatever. And I asked them to come, that I was inviting them to come and present a 5 to 10 minute action for me on a platform that would be in the faculty show. I'm sorry I forgot to bring the letter. The letter was much cleaner than I can think of right now. I mean, I can remember. But it referred to doing a very simple action, shine your shoes, take a bath, whatever. And this will be presented to me at a specific time. And when you're finished, clean everything up. The piece will be documented, and if you're interested, call the art gallery or the art office, for further information. So I set up this sort of calendar. I was teaching 4 days a week, and so every morning at 11 o'clock and every afternoon at 2 o'clock, there was a performance schedule. I had no idea who was coming, what they were going to do, anything. And so what I did was I'd be in my class, and 11 o'clock come, and I'd say, well, students, it's time for me to go to the performance. If you'd like to come, fine. If not, I'll meet you back here after the performance. So I would go to the performance, lay down, take the chair off the platform, sit down, and wait. A lot of times other people would come and sit around the gallery to see the performance. Sometimes no one would come except the individual. The individual would do whatever performance they were going to do. I'd smile, or whatever. And I also mentioned that I won't participate. Don't count on me participating. I'm not participating. I'm just going to watch the performance, and that's it. Then they got up and cleared off, the platform. And then I got up, walked over the platform, and laid down and rested. And I just lay there with my eyes shut until everybody left. The first time it took an hour and a half, because they were just waiting for me to, they knew I was in preps for what Pot's going to do, They waited and waited and waited. Nothing ever happened. And when finally everybody was gone, I got up and left. It was really lovely because I didn't have to get involved in, comments, oh, great, oh, I really liked your... I didn't have to get into any of that. I could just come, watch it, go up and lay down. And it was very good because a lot of times I'd be incredibly exhausted. Because I would... if the person was nervous, I became extremely nervous. It was amazing how I interrelated with the person who was on the platform. And most of the events or whatever were directed right to me. So I was just sucked out. I was participating, even though I just sat there. I mean, it was impossible for me not to participate. Because I became right in, because most of the people I knew, and it just drew me in. Well, anyway, okay, so that's sort of the format. Now, I don't have these in very specific order, but what I might do is just go through them and just tell you little things about it. This particular performance was 2 students, and this happened to be the day that the president was going to have a big luncheon. And they were getting the space all ready for this luncheon. And so these people decided they would have a little picnic first, beat this guy out. And so in the morning they came in, they just set up this little thing and started having this lunch. Well, there's this little box, and this little lid on this box kept trying to get open while they're eating this lunch. They're just having this light conversation, eating these things. And pretty soon this lid pops open, and out comes this rat. Happens to be their pet rat. And the pet rat comes running over and gets on one plate and starts eating the food. And they're talking and eating the same food, right? And running over to the other one and eating the food. And just having a great time, running around eating all this food. And people are getting... And there's this, people are laying out tables. You can see a couple tables in the background. There's people in there setting up the tables for this president's luncheon, and they're all into this very proper thing. And this rat's running around while these people are... And it was really quite nice. And apparently what happened was these people always have their little rat come out when they have dinner and allow it to just pick off their plate. And so, you know, the little rat was in the box, and he knew what was going on. This dinner was going on. He just wanted to get out there and have some, you know, little dinner with it. And then after that was over, this is a view of what I did. I just went on, took my glass off, laid down, just exactly in that position, shut my eyes, and just stayed there. Let's just break for a moment, because we had a 5-minute flash, and if you guys want to change the tape, right, I'm talking to you. I guess, how long will that take? A couple minutes or something? And then we'll just continue with these, rather than me being concerned about worrying about when it's going to break. How long will it take?
I think about 5 minutes.
5 minutes. So you want to get up and stretch or something, and then we can go back. Sure.